Hello and thank you for watching. This is STSC back again with LEGO Transformers Dark of the Moon Megatron. Here we have Megatron in his truck mode. Having Megatron be a truck is definitely an unconventional decision, but honestly I always really enjoyed this vehicle mode. At the cost of parroting most other people, it definitely has a Mad Max vibe to it. And it's just pure edginess. The rusted out look mixed with the utilitarian design and the excessive ornaments makes for a really weird truck. But I think it's really fitting for movie Megatron as a character. Regardless, I think I did a pretty good job representing the mode's many details. He has all 10 wheels, 5 on each side. He has a nice, clean, long tank, which was pretty important to me, and I'm glad I got that rounded shape. So it's not just a slightly rounded block sitting on his back. Now, unfortunately, there is no joint at the trailer, so it is just one rigid piece. I just couldn't fit in that detail at this scale. However, you can kind of remove the trailer if you want to. You see, there's 2 ball joints in there, and you just kind of pop it out like this. And then you can see here, you have the truck by itself. And something you will instantly notice is it's a little bit hollow. This is just kind of a byproduct of how it has to transform. After all, these are pretty much just his legs, so a lot of this mass has to compress, and it couldn't be a solid truck. However, if you really want to have this truck separate, and you do not like that gap there, which fair enough, you can kind of fix it by bringing in the rear axles here, like this. Of course, this now causes a new issue, which is he's got a tiny bed. Of course, from some angles, that might not be too apparent, but I don't know. That just looks very silly. Funny enough, the trailer actually fares a lot better as its own cohesive unit, since, well, it doesn't have to do as much. And it actually has a fold-down stand, so the trailer can sit like this without the truck, and the truck can kind of drive away. Yeah, it's something it can do. Personally, I'm never going to use this feature. I just keep the truck together, but I thought it was kind of neat that it could do it at all. Now, something you may have noticed is the distinct lack of any chains on this truck. In the movie, this design has various chains hanging around on its tanker trailer, so to emulate that, I have this accessory, which is 2 chains on a brick. To put it on, you simply have to peg it up top, wrap the chains around, and peg the chains together. Honestly, in this mode, I'm not a huge fan of how the chains look. I mostly included them for robot mode, but if you want to, they can fit on the trailer. For size comparison, here we have Megatron with a minifigure. With his right-hand man, Soundwave. And with his mortal enemy, Optimus Prime. I think it's kind of funny that I just happened to build the 2 rusted truck versions of these characters. And although these versions never interacted, I think they look pretty cool together, and they scale pretty well. That's all I have to say about this mode, so now it's time to transform. And here we have Megatron in his robot mode. In this mode, I think I got him pretty accurate. He has all the wheels where they're supposed to be, 2 on the shoulders, 1 on the ankle, and 2 on the inner ankles. He's got the kind of appropriate big thighs, and he's got the kind of nondescript shrapnel chest going on. You might recognize this as IX Rollout IX's head design from his Revenge of the Fallen Megatron. I decided to use it because honestly, I don't think there's a better way to represent his head at this scale. Of course, it is a little bit different, as for this design I've made it asymmetrical, so there's kind of a chunk missing from his battle-damaged face. Speaking of which, his arms are appropriately asymmetrical. He's got the one claw hand and the one much smaller hand there. And just in general, obviously the rust spots and the coloration are not exact from side to side. His transformation is actually pretty clean, and he ends up with not a lot of kibble. The cab of the truck does kind of end up hanging out behind his knees, but it doesn't affect articulation too much, so I don't mind. I also kind of wish I was able to get these wheels to kind of swing forward further up his shoulder, but as is, I think it looks fine. For size comparison, here we have Megatron with a minifigure, with Optimus Prime, who he is unfortunately just about the same height as. I believe in the movie he's supposed to be a little bit taller than Optimus, by about a head, I think. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way with these two. They're roughly the same height. But Megatron still looks noticeably chunkier than Optimus, so I think the scale still works out decently. And with his right-hand man, Soundwave. It's a little awkward having Soundwave be so short, but unfortunately that's just kind of how it is in the movies, considering, well, one of them's a truck and the other is a car. So, what are you gonna do? As an accessory, I've built his trusty shotgun, quite simply. It can clip into the base of his hand, or it can be stored on a stud on his back. That same stud is available in truck mode if you want the shotgun to be stored on the truck. The same chain assembly can also be used in this mode. Interestingly enough, it actually attaches by the same stud on his back, meaning if you want to, you could keep these on through the transformation. The chains definitely look better in this mode than they did on the truck, but I still kind of prefer the clean, less accurate look without them. But if we want full movie accuracy, he's still missing one thing: his cloak. So yes, Dark of the Moon Megatron wears a cloak, and it's a very important part of the design. Dare I say it is almost iconic, but it's just not something you can really emulate in Lego. At least not with the pieces that I have. If I had the CCBS Rey from Force Awakens, I would probably try using her fabric piece, since it's a appropriate color, but I have no clue if that would work. I've never even handled that piece, so I don't know if it could be made into an appropriate cloak for this guy. And unfortunately, I don't really own any other pieces of Lego cloth that are the correct color. Not even a Magna Guard cape, which would be way too small for this guy. So, unfortunately, my only real option is this Vezon cape, which, well, it isn't really a good option. It's way too big. So big, in fact, that it can practically cover the entire truck mode, so good luck trying to store it there. However, if despite all of those issues you just really want your Megatron to have a cape, it can kind of fit on him. Despite the blatant inaccuracy, I do think this looks pretty cool, but it can get pretty unwieldy. So to cover articulation, I'll be taking off all these accessories. And as far as articulation is concerned, Megatron is actually pretty robust. At the head, he can look left and right. Then at the shoulders, he goes up and down, and then forward and backward there, as well as forward and backward at a joint here that can get kind of stuck. This tap joint, which can be very loose. So a lot of the time I leave it stuck, and I will just use this joint. Then at the elbow, he's got a 90-degree bend, and a rotation. At the other elbow, he actually has a double joint with kind of a hinge at the wrist and a hinge at the elbow. At the waist, he has a proper swivel. Then at the hips, he has a universal joint, which can be a bit hindered because his hips are just massive. So you have to be kind of careful if you want full range. You have to kind of work around the chunk of his design. Then at the knees, he gets roughly a 90-degree bend, and he has a toe pivot. Although he has a lot of points of articulation on paper, Megatron can sometimes be a bit awkward to pose. Despite that, once you do get him in a pose, I think he looks pretty damn good in it. And overall, I'm happy with the articulation. And that's about all I have to say about this guy. I definitely wish I had a more accurate cloak for this guy, but despite that, I'm still really happy with how he turned out. Funny enough, one of my favorite parts of this figure is actually also kind of an issue with it. And it's the fact that it goes from a truck with a trailer to being a robot the same size as my Optimus Prime. Personally, I find that kind of stuff really interesting. Seeing how different Transformers use their mass, and how some will seemingly shrink while others will seemingly grow. Obviously, in this case, it ended up being less accurate because of that, but still, I think it's kind of cool how the amount of mass that made up an entire robot now really just makes up this guy's legs. Anyways, I'll see you next time.